Hello and welcome. This is a video tutorial for the GSpawn Level Designer Lite Edition, in which I'm going to show you how to build modular environments. I'm going to be using assets from 3D Forge from the Village Interiors kit. So make sure you have the GSpawn Level Designer Lite Edition package imported inside your project. And then to initialize the plugin, just go to Tools, GSpawn Lite, and click on Initialize. The plugin will create a bunch of assets that it needs to store settings and stuff like that. And once it's done, you can see we get this grid inside the scene view, which we're going to be using for snapping. Now, if you wish, you can hide Unity's default grid. I've already done that before I started to record. So you can go here and just make sure the opacity thumb is set to 0. That will hide the Unity grid so that it doesn't get in the way. Alright, now let's actually start talking about prefab management. So before you can actually spawn prefabs in the scene, you're gonna have to tell GSpawn what prefabs you're going to be using. So go to Tools, GSpawn Lite, Windows, Prefab Library Manager, and Tools, GSpawn Lite, Windows, Prefab Manager. Okay, so in GSpawn, prefabs are organized in prefab libraries, and you can create prefab libraries either manually, or you can just create them from folder hierarchies. And we're going to use both approaches in this video. So I'm going to go to this Fantasy Interiors folder, and I'm going to drag and drop the Villages and Towns folder inside the Prefab Library Manager window. The plugin will create a hierarchy of libraries which resembles the folder structure. Libraries which are colored in orange are empty libraries which don't have any prefabs, and the other libraries have the number of prefabs shown to the far right. Now when you click on these libraries, the prefab previews will show up in the window on the right, and you can rotate these previews if you hold down the middle mouse button and move the mouse. You can rotate the previews like this. You can reset the previews using this camera. You can reset the rotation using the camera icon here. And you also have this yellow glowing button, which what it does is it highlights the prefab assets inside the project. Okay. Now, before we move any further, what I'd like to do is I'm going to go to Edit, Preferences, and it's under GSpawn Input. I'm going to make sure I have this Log Shortcuts toggle checked. What this will do is when I'm going to be working in the scene view, rotating prefabs, spawning, and so on, the hotkeys, the text of the hotkeys which I'm going to use is going to show on the screen, so you can more easily see what hotkeys I'm using. Even though I'm still gonna, I'm gonna say them out loud most of the times. In the inspector, we have three. In the top toolbar, we have 3 buttons which allow you to switch between different ways in which you can interact with the plugin. We have Object Spawn, which allows you to spawn objects in the scene using different spawn tools. You have Object Select and Manipulate, which allows you to select objects and manipulate them in different ways. And finally, you have Object Erase. Now, most of the times you're going to be using Object Spawn and Object Select and Manipulate. In Object Spawn, you have 4 additional buttons here, which allow you to pick a spawn tool. And yeah, let's actually. I'm going to extract some prefabs which I know that I'm going to use, and then we're going to start spawning objects. Okay, so I'm going to create a new library called Tutorial Floors. Click on the plus icon. I'm going to pin it so that the library is not hidden when I search for other libraries. So if the library doesn't meet the search criteria, the name search criteria, it won't be hidden. I want it to always stay visible. And I'm going to search for floors. Okay, so I'm going to click on the floors library, click on one of the prefabs inside the library, press Ctrl A, Ctrl C, and then click on the tutorial floors and press Ctrl V. I'm going to create another library called Tutorial Walls, pin it, search for wall, and I know I'm going to be using wall_09, select one prefab, Ctrl A, Ctrl C, and then click on Tutorial Walls and press Ctrl V. Alright, so these are all the these are all the libraries which I plan on using. These are all the prefabs which I plan on using in the beginning. So let's actually start spawning. I'm going to use the modular snap tool to initially to spawn, and I'm going to double click on this floor prefab right here. And when I do, notice that we get this object in the scene. Is called a spawn guide, and we can move it with the mouse, and when we move it with the mouse, it automatically snaps to the grid. We can rotate it using the Y key to rotate around the Y-axis, or the Z-axis, or X for the X-axis. I can press I to reset its rotation to its original rotation, and O to reset the scale to original. I can also move it up and down using Q and E, or I can just press reset to reset its vertical offset. Okay, now if I left click, I can spawn objects. The problem is that I haven't set up the grid cell size, so we need to take care of the grid cell size, otherwise our objects will not spawn correctly. So I'm going to go to Tools, GSpawn, Windows, Grid Settings, and this package works with 0.25. So set the cell size to 0.25. If this is the safest value you can use, generally use. The idea is that if there's a README file or some kind of documentation associated with the package you're using, which is most of the times that's the case, so go ahead and read that. Otherwise, 0.25 you can't go wrong with this. At least not in my experience. Okay. So now we can left click to spawn different floors, and notice that sometimes we get these highlights in the scene. So this happens when the floor object is aligned with other objects in the scene. Yeah. So the highlights, the highlighted objects are aligned with the position of the spawn guide, and this can sometimes be really useful for alignment. And the color of the highlight indicates the axis of alignment. So red is for X and blue is for Z. Okay, now the thing is with floors, I don't want to do this all the time, because floors can be quite numerous, and you just want to quickly do this. You want to do this as fast as possible. So we're going to use a different tool instead. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to selection mode. Select all of these guys and press delete to delete them. Switch back to object selection, to object spawn, and then press the box spawn tool. And now what we can do is I'm going to start from the origin. You don't have to start from the origin, but I like to start from the origin. So left click, and then when you left click, you can move the mouse to create this, to establish the size of the volume that you wish to create here, and create a 4x5 volume. Left click to spawn. Okay, so that was, this is usually how you want to spawn floors in GSpawn. Now let's place a bunch of walls. I'm gonna switch to modular snapping again, go to my tutorial walls library, and I'm gonna pick this wall prefab right here. Now again, with walls, if we do this manually with modular snapping, it's gonna take quite a long time. So there's a faster way to do that. To do this, select segments spawn, and then go to the segment settings and set corner connection to overlap, and then also check rotated corners. Left click to add segments, left click again, and then shift left click to commit. Now, this strategy works with convex areas only. If you're using concave areas, you're going to have to do it in multiple steps. So what I mean is, let me show you an example. I'm going to place a bunch of floors here really quick. Yeah. So in this particular case, if we were to do it like before, it won't work, and let me show you why. There you go. Yeah, so it no longer aligns with the floor, and notice that it goes outside of the room. The last wall piece goes outside of the room. Yeah, that's because of this. That's because of the fact that that's because of the outer corner here, which doesn't respect the rules that were defined for these particular assets, right? So what we need to do is we need to do this in separate steps. The first step would be this shape, and then the second step would be whatever remains, right? Okay. Now it didn't spawn the last prefab because I have avoid overlaps checked, which tests the intersection between the object that you're spawning and objects which already exist inside the scene. So if we uncheck this, it will spawn it. Okay. Now I'm gonna delete this because I don't need it. So let's go back to our little room here. If we look in the walls library, we see we have this corner wall which we can use. So what we can do is we can select these wall prefabs at the corner and delete them and replace them with this wall prefab. Now I'm operating in object selection now, and in object selection what I can do is I can click on one of the prefab previews and drag and drop it in the scene, and then press Y to rotate it, and notice that when you drop it, it will automatically start snapping to the grid. Okay. What we also can do is duplicate it by pressing Ctrl D, and then press D again to start snapping, and then press Y to rotate and snap it into place. Okay, press Ctrl D, rotate, snap. Okay. Now I'm gonna delete this corner here because I feel like it looks a little bit more interesting like this, and I'm gonna drop some of these guys. I'm gonna drop some of these guys here. There you go. Now this is where we should, like right here in the corner, this is where we should have a pillar. So I'm gonna search for pillar, and let's see, which one is it? I think this is the one. I'm gonna drag and drop it. There you go. Okay, great. Now what I would like to do is I would like to add an entrance to our little environment. So I'm aiming for a small library environment. So I'm going to select this prefab here in the middle. I'm going to go to my tutorial walls, and I'm going to select a prefab that resembles an entrance. There you go. This is the one. So I have this prefab selected in the scene view, and what I can do is I can hold down the Alt key and left click on the prefab preview in the prefab manager, and that will replace my object in the scene view. This is a really useful tool for swapping prefabs in the scene. What I can also do is I can hold down Alt and left click on one of the objects in the scene view to perform the same kind of replacement operation, right? But I'm gonna leave an entrance here, and then I wanna put a door in there. So I'm searching for doors, and I'm gonna use this one. Drag and drop it, press Y to rotate, left click, there you go. Okay, so this is the beginning of a small library. Let's add some bookshelves. So I'm going to search for bookshelves. I'm gonna make the previews a little bit smaller so that it's easier to find those guys. Okay. I'm going to switch to object spawn. I'm going to activate modular snapping. So when placing single objects that you want to have aligned to the grid, or you want precise placement, you can activate modular snapping. And I'm going to activate this guy right here, and just place them against the wall. So when the other bookshelves are highlighted in orange, it means that the position align on the x-axis. So that's what we want, right? Okay. Do the same on the other side. And here. Okay, now I can, what happens is that all of these shelves are of the same kind, yeah? But there are multiple variations of them in the Prefab Manager. So what we can do is we can, I can select one of the shelves, press Shift A, select all of the shelves in the scene view, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select some shelf variations in the Prefab Manager, and I'm going to hold down Ctrl Alt and left click on one of the selected prefabs, And what this will do is it will randomize the prefabs in the scene view so that we get more diversity, right? Great. Now let's add some carpets. And for carpets, we're going to use another spawn tool, which is prop spawn. So prop spawn, the way it works is it no longer snaps to the grid. You can place objects on meshes or on terrains. And in this case, we want to use it for carpets. So I'm going to search for woven, and let's see which one. I'm going to use this long one right here. I'm going to double click on it. And now notice that the pixels are fighting with each other because the carpet and the floors are sitting on the same plane. So in the settings in the inspector, you can go to implicit offset and set this to a small value, something like 0.001, and that will fix our problem. And in prop spawn, you can hold down Shift and move the mouse to rotate the object, and hold down Control and move the mouse to scale it. Right? Now I'm gonna use its original scale, but I'm just gonna slightly rotate it and place another one over here. There we go. And now I'm gonna place some bookstands. Okay, press Y to rotate. There you go. I'm gonna slightly rotate them so that it doesn't look as if they're all straight. I'm just gonna add a little bit of randomness here, because people are never this tidy, usually. Okay. Let's also have an empty one. Yeah. This one hasn't been decorated. Okay, now let's add some furniture, like chairs. Okay, now I'm going to switch to selection mode, select the chairs, press Shift A, and then make sure that we have all the chairs selected. So in order to select multiple chairs in the Prefab Manager, select one chair and then Shift left click on the last chair that you want to have selected. And now hold down Ctrl Alt, left click, and this will randomize the chairs. Okay, now let's add some suspended bookshelves. I'm going to use Modular Snapping, and I'm going to use these guys right here. Okay, switch to selection mode, select one of these guys, press Shift A, and now we're going to randomize. So I'm going to select all of these guys, hold down Ctrl Alt, and then left click. Yeah, so it's using different prefab variants. Okay. I'm going to switch to Modular Snapping, and I want to add 2 more bookshelves here in the middle. And what I'm going to do this time, instead of using the Prefab Manager, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Alt key and left click on one of the bookshelves in the scene view. Yeah, this is another way to pick prefabs when working in spawn mode. You don't necessarily have to use the Prefab Manager. You can just Alt and left click on one of the prefabs that you would like to control. Okay, rotate. Okay, there you go. So we're done with bookshelves for now. What I would like to do now is replace this middle area right here, this area in the middle. I want to turn those floor tiles from wood to something like stone. So I'm going to go to floors, and I think I'm going to use something like, I don't know, like this, for example. So I'm going to switch to selection mode, and I'm going to activate a new selection tool. The default selection tool is the rectangle, but I would like to activate the selection segments tool. So with selection segments, what you can do is essentially you can basically just kind of draw your selection with using lines. So just left click, and as you move the mouse, notice that it creates another endpoint for the line, and it will select the objects that the line intersects. Then you have to left click again to add a new segment, then left click, and then shift left click to commit, switch back to selection rectangle, and now I can alt and left click to replace those prefabs. Yeah. Okay, now what I would like to do now is I would like to create a ceiling. So the way you do that, the first thing you want to do is, obviously the ceiling is going to sit at the top, right? So we're going to have to place the grid at the top of the walls. So I'm going to hold down the G key and then double click somewhere towards the top of one of the wall prefabs. When you double click like that, the plugin will snap the grid position to the closest extremity of the clicked object. Yeah? In this case, it's the top. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we have all the floor objects selected. So I'm going to select one of the stone floors, one of the wood floors, and then press Shift A to select all of them. Press Ctrl D to duplicate, and then press Shift G to project the objects on top of the grid, on the grid plane, which is on top of the walls. And finally, then press the X key to rotate the tiles. So now we have a ceiling. The only thing left to do is actually use Alt and left click on one of the prefabs so that we can get a single prefab for the ceiling. Okay, so now we're using a stone prefab for the ceiling. There you go. Now the last thing I would like to show you is how to organize your scene, because currently, as you probably have noticed, all of our objects reside at the root level of the scene, which is not very tidy. So let's go ahead and use object groups for this purpose. I'm gonna go to Tools, GSpawn, Windows, Object Groups, and what an object group is basically an object. It's a container for objects. Yeah, it's an object that has other objects as children. It's a way to organize your scene. So it's pretty much the same way that you can use prefab libraries to organize prefabs. You can use object groups to organize your objects in the scene. And I'm gonna create the first object group. I'm gonna call it OG library. Yeah, this is gonna be our root object group. You don't have to necessarily have a root object group. I'm just doing it for this tutorial. And also, you don't have to use the OG prefix. This is something that I like to use. It's a convention that I use. But feel free to name your object groups as you wish. I'm gonna create another one called OG walls. Another one OG floors and ceiling. And another one called OG props. I'm going to select these three guys and I'm going to drag and drop them on the OG library so that they can be a parent. They can be children of the OG library object group. If we look in the hierarchy view, notice that we have this same hierarchy. Now, if you want to delete object groups, I would advise you to delete them from the object group window. Don't delete object groups directly from the hierarchy view, because it's not a very friendly operation. Yeah, things can break if you do that. So delete them from here. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to link our prefabs to those object groups which we have created. When you link a prefab to an object group, what happens is that every time you spawn that prefab in the scene, the prefab will spawn as a child of that object group. Now we already have a bunch of prefabs which we spawned, so let's go ahead. We're gonna need to attach them to their attached object groups. So we have the floor prefabs. I'm gonna click on Ctrl A to select them. I'm gonna press Ctrl A to select all of them, and then I'm gonna drag and drop the OG floors and ceiling object group on top of one of these selected prefabs. This will attach this object group to all the floor prefabs, and now if I press this button here, apply object group links for selected prefabs, what will happen is that all the floor objects and the ceiling objects which I've placed in the scene will be attached to the OG floors and ceiling object group. Yeah, And as I said, from now on, if we spawn one of these floor objects, it will no longer go to the root, it will go under this object. Okay, now let's do the same with the walls. Control A to select all the walls, drag and drop the OG walls, and then click on this button, apply object group links for selected prefabs. There you go. And then finally, we want to assign the props. Actually, I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna select the pillar. I'm gonna press Shift C, but I need to expand. need to expand the libraries. So I'm gonna press Shift C, and what this will do is it will select the prefab. The prefab I selected in the scene view, it will select it in the prefab manager. And then what I like to do is I'm gonna select all of these prefabs and I'm gonna assign them to the OG walls object group, and then press this button again. Okay. And finally, we need to handle the props. Okay. So I'm going to hide the walls and the floors and the ceiling. This leaves me with the props only. I'm going to select all the props. I'm going to press Shift C. This will highlight all the prefabs in the prefab manager. Yeah. I'm going to press Control A to select all of these prefabs and drag and drop the OG props on top of them, and then press the button. Okay, so now we have a clean scene which we can organize by walls, floors, and props. Okay. Now let's activate all of these guys. And if I were to now, for example, spawn something like this, an object like this, so it's the grid is currently on top of the walls. I'm going to press G, left click. Let's put some puddles over here. Notice that when I spawn these bottles, they're no longer spawned at the root level. They will be spawned in the props object group. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you. Bye.